or you're searching for a CRM or something, and then you're like, oh, yeah, I remember HubSpot. I've seen them around. Like, for sure, there's a complementary factor of like, what else are you doing, right? Because if you're not doing anything else, and then you just try to do PPC, you might struggle.
Totally. Yep.
So you want to talk about that then? Talk about the state of inbound, not the state of inbound, but just a little bit on inbound. Wing It Podcast, goosedigital.com, episode 91. Who do we have?
Kevin Butler.
Michael Texani. All right. Wing It Unhinged.
Unhinged, but we're not at 100 yet.
Yeah, we're not 100. Yeah, it's been summer. We've been slacking. We've been traveling.
True.
We'll get there. We'll ramp it up. Okay, so we're Unhinged is the reflections of a marketing agency. Reflection of, is that what we call it?
Reflections of what we're seeing in this digital landscape, so the vantage point we have across 200 some clients.
Almost 300.
Almost 300.
How shy of 300 are we?
Closer to 250. It's like 240 something.
Oh, God, I thought it was more than that. Okay. Well, we got to shut this down and go get some more deals.
And of course, all the goings on we see across, whether it's email and marketing automation, digital marketing, even sort of, we were just talking about reporting and attribution, and we'll just kind of chalk into data and insights.
Yeah.
Even strategy on top of that. So lots going on as far as things for us.
But that's the theme, if you want to say theme,
yeah,
of this podcast sub-series. Reflections. Yeah. More that than thought leadership, although it kind of plays into it because we're talking about stuff that people might consider to be thought leadership-y.
Yeah, like I think your and I's perspective is sort of always a little bit on the lens of strategy, right? We're just thinking about, well, why is that the case? And here's what we're seeing, and even making small jumps to repercussions or sort of advancements based on whatever it is that we're seeing. So I think you get a little bit of that flair just naturally, but
yeah,
we'll try to stay as factual as possible.
Okay. So we started to riff on the state of inbound, or I don't know what we're calling it, but like a bunch of our clients sort of revamping their pay-per-click stuff. They're kind of more some of the keyword buying, maybe even some inbound search, organic kind of stuff. But we started talking about just like, what's this look like now, and kind of right now, 2023 going forward. We've certainly seen people have a lot of success with it, and it still is strong from a pipeline and a revenue perspective, or like at the very least profitable, something that they wouldn't want to just remove out of their program.
Should be.
There's others that are kind of struggling with it. There's spam leads, there's a bunch of stuff in there on optimization. So, I mean, let's just go into that for a little bit, what that's been like.
Yeah, I think to me, like, there's definitely a bit of a discrepancy that I'm seeing more and more as far as percentage of, call it quality leads, coming from paid search endeavors across organizations. And I think, to your point, it still makes up a meaningful part of overall how you're going to go and build qualified pipe and hopefully revenue associated with that inbound spend. But to me, it's like, it's just so murky now. It's just not black and white like perhaps it once was. Now you've got all kinds of other considerations and what I'll call external factors, right? And even how are you approaching paid? Is it from, say, what you deem to be high intent keywords and terms, or is it more on sort of brand terms? And there's two organizations that I work with really closely that we've been experimenting on that, where the more we seem to invest on brand and awareness level keywords across both Google and even LinkedIn, the more organic leads come through. And we've done this in one of my clients, great reputation, great brand in their space. But we've done this on 3 different style of campaigns with 3 different types of audiences, and each one has done this.
Right.
To a point where I think we can quite clearly correlate and connect. Increased spend usually seems to have about a 2 to maybe 4 week sort of delay, and then you start seeing all of a sudden this, initially perceived organic lead volume just increase.
Right. Yeah. And that, I mean, Google Analytics gives you some ability to sort of see, the the capture rate of traffic between paid and if it like originated from paid and stuff like that. But that not all that always that attribution is really bulletproof, as we know.
Yeah.
But I wonder, with because you talked about the strength of a brand in an environment, and how that actually can upweight the likelihood of somebody sort of going through your PPC ad, right?
Yeah.
And I think that's a good point. I think there's a lot of customers that we work with though that don't have maybe, a highly recognized brand in their segment. They might be a player in their segment, but like a customer coming into that environment say, oh, I want to change my accounting system or whatever. And well, they're not up to speed on all the service providers in the accounting, and you know what I mean?
And I think so. Like that makes sense, right? Like when you think of any sort of, this is more of a B2B comment, but any sort of category, you're going to have leaders and challengers.
Sure.
And I think typically you've seen behavior from the leaders are, hey, we're the leaders. We don't necessarily have to go as heavy and invest as much in inbound because we kind of have, if there is any demand, they are likely going to come to us first.
Already, because we're a leader.
Correct. And so the challengers will say we have to kind of make up for that we're not the perceived leaders. And that's why we're going to go invest probably a bit more in those terms. I think that makes sense. And we've definitely, call it since COVID, we've seen a lot of the leaders really pull back on paid spend as a means to save some cash or reallocate it in other places. Yeah. I think Salesforce and HubSpot were two of the ones that were pretty well documented as doing that, and it kind of makes sense. Like they're pillars in their spaces. Like
yeah,
who's looking for CRM or marketing automation solutions and not looking at them? So maybe they feel like they've crossed that bridge, where they're like, we're in every RFP, where any search selection process is going to include us probably like 9 times out of 10.
Yeah, like we'll maintain our branded keyword campaign. So Salesforce X, we want to make sure we run those ads. But
I mean, can you imagine what they even spend on that?
Oh yeah, I'm sure it's a lot.
Yeah.
But I think for a lot of organizations that come into this, they think, well, what's the time frame to sort of figure this out? How much of a budget should I have? What really should I expect? And if we look at, say, Goose and our spend in this area, it's actually a little scary because the way we set up our campaigns, they could spend way more money than we actually have. So the way they're configured, they could spend $500,000 a year. We're not going to spend $500,000 a year by any stretch of the imagination on search, right? And we don't even spend anywhere close to that. No. But the way we've had to sort of like optimize and work with them is to sort of figure out, well, what would that threshold be? Like, well, how much is available to us? We want to get in on the best auctions at the right time. We don't want to be constrained by budget. It doesn't mean we don't get, spam leads. We do. I think a lot of B2Bs are facing this right now. Doesn't mean we don't get pipeline deals that don't turn into anything because they're not a fit. But, every time we look at these numbers, and we did, our roll up, whatever, the beginning of this quarter for last year, all of last year, every time we look at it, we're like, it still makes sense. We're seeing a return on investment of several dollars over marketing spend every year, some really great accounts to get into. What's the conversion rate? Yeah, it's still probably in around that 20% range. So it's not like on deals. So it's not like we're knocking everyone out of the park. We'd certainly love it to be higher. And yes, it consumes sales resource to have to go through all those conversations just to sort of lose a bunch. But when we look at the numbers, we're like, well, we would still take the revenue and the deals that we are winning all day long. Right. So I think it's like for companies to looking to get into this, it's like, how do they wrap their head around that process to say, like, when can we be convinced that this is either a channel that could work for us or maybe not work for us?
All sorts of considerations there. I think the very first one would be the price point on your average deal. And does it actually make sense? Like if each of our deals, like just thinking about kind of the cost of our average click, if each of our deals were like $10, no, it probably wouldn't make sense, right?
Right.
So I think we get a lot of benefit there where if really our conversion is about the same, kind of like you were saying, and we only really have to close 1 to 3 out of every 20 paid clicks, then yeah, we probably are going to end up all right.
Yeah.
Not to mention we have the ability, like on the average life and value of our clients. Yeah, we could probably get 2, 3, maybe 4 engagements total. I think we'll end up really, really good in the end. So it depends on the organization's thinking about this investment. Does that really make sense for them?
Yeah.
And I do think there's a sweet spot too in terms of thinking about your average deal size or ACV, and then even like the sales cycles and the length to actually get them. Like, are you going to really pay, I don't know, a really high amount for clicks, recognizing it's going to take 9 to 12 months to close? I don't know.
Yeah, for sure. And that becomes very difficult for those organizations to really even track, oh, a year's worth of an investment, let's say. And it doesn't have to be crazy, but to be able to go back and really understand, like, yeah, that deal that we did this year was in our pipe last year from a keyword that we bought. And that's great. Thank God we know that, because we don't want to stop doing those keywords, even though, like, day in and day out, you're going to be looking at some level of spam, some level of deals that don't convert, et cetera, et cetera. So it's really challenging, I think, for companies to wrap their head around this. And the best advice I think that, we can give is sort of in the lens of, work with a partner, I think, that can give you a sense of the test environment. Hey, we want to run this for 90 days. Here's exactly what we're looking for. This is the size of the media budget that we think is going to give us the best bang. Like, if it's driven from the client lens of we only want to spend a certain amount and here's what we've only ever got over time, it's possible and highly likely that they don't actually know what all those elements are, and they are missing the boat. Yeah, we only want to keep our budget at X. Well, maybe your budget taps out because the cost per click is what it is, and your ads aren't even showing up when they should be, type of thing, right? Or you don't have enough budget left to get in those options.
For sure. So I think there's 3 considerations you've got to have here when you're thinking about doing this. Consideration number 1 would be, are you in a defined category, or are you playing a central role in creating a new category? Mm-hmm. Because that's going to have a material impact on the likelihood of individuals searching for things that you're buying keywords for and your ability to actually close those.
Right.
If it's a brand new category, no one knows they need this great new product that you offer, it's going to be harder. It just is. And your success rate will show that. If it's a known category, it's like CRM support, that's a lot different than a brand new thing no one yet gets. Mm-hmm. So that's number 1. Number 2 is going to be, I think whoever you work with an internal team, an external agency, you have to have a thesis as to what you're trying to test and how long that's going to go for. Mm-hmm. I think 90 days, to your point, is probably the minimum. You're going to need time to build this. You're going to need time to optimize and try slightly different approaches to see what works and what doesn't work. Your initial baseline isn't going to say a whole lot other than you convert X% of the time. Can that be better? Did you really knock it out of the park? You don't know. And I think the third thing is going to be all about, what do you define as success? Like, what are the key things you're looking to do as part of that thesis, and how do you connect it to actual results? Is it, we want to get 3 sales? Okay. Is that possible? Mm-hmm. Maybe not. But also, we're trying to really validate if these kinds of terms that we think are high intent, in fact, reflect that once we get through and talk to the lead.
Right.
Because it's one thing for you to think it, it's quite another for a potential buyer to support that or agree with it, right?
Yeah. So I think I would say that on top of that, maybe adding a couple more would be, in the vein of determining whether or not something is, a known entity, or that there's actually volume for what you have, right? So we have the tools available. You can see how much, search volume there is for these types of keywords and ancillaries, and then you can also see the competition, right? So, there's 3 or 4 other organizations. Yeah, we know even who they are. They would legit compete with us. Mm-hmm. Oh, they've been running this. This is roughly their budget. These are tools that are available. There could very well be a reason why they're doing that. So when you look at that from that lens, you might be like, well, we got to be there too. So then the second thing I would say is, what are they doing? Like what are they promoting from both an ad copy perspective? Where are they landing? So that you're also considering the downstream impact of all those clicks. Where are they going to land on? So your idea might be to have them go to some white paper download or just request a quote or whatever the case may be. Meanwhile, your competition has got videos and all kinds of free data that helps them get through the next step of what they're doing, and also a form that lets them connect to a salesperson. Well, now you've got a total mismatch of like experiences there. And, I don't know about you, but when I go to look for stuff, it's the first thing you're doing. You're opening in a new tab the 3 or 4 top players that you believe that fit, right? And then you're submitting the form on the ones that you think make sense. So if you're kind of not in that same realm, it could be a huge issue. So yeah, those would be other tips I think that you would want to take into consideration beyond just buying the keyword, right?
Oh, gosh, and then from there, like the amount of like things on that list as far as what to do and how to handle them just starts blowing up. We won't get into it here, but it's even what's the process for following up with a lead? Is there like an automated portion of that? Is there a rep reaching out?
Calendly link or some sort of quick
All
ability.
that.
Yeah.
And then even goes into like, well, how are you qualifying the lead after? Like, what do you know about them? What's the research process? What are the questions you would ask to validate? Is it budget qualified? We think there's a need qualified based on the term. We think, like, how do you approach it? What's the way you do that?
Yeah.
All of these things are crucial.
Yeah. Are you just a column fodder, one more deal in a mix of deals that are already happening, and now your reps are responding to these things and they think they're great leads, and they're actually not because the pre-qual isn't really what it should be, right?
For sure. Like, I think any of our clients that I work with will laugh at this comment, but to me, there's such a huge difference between inbound and sort of more outbound marketing. And what I always say is, with outbound, you have gone and hand selected all of the organizations that you want to work with that are probably really great fits for what you do and the products that you offer. There should be no question around like the fit factor.
Yeah.
Now, do they have the need? Is the timing right? You've got to figure all that out, but they're all initially qualified.
Yeah.
With inbound, though, you're only controlling the term in which someone comes to you and finds out about you.
Sure.
You have no idea if they're the right fit for you as far as like your offering, how much it costs. And so the crude analogy I always make is like, my mom might come in on a PPC and she's clicking around and driving lead scores and everything, and on the surface it seems super engaged, but that's not a qualified buyer. And we have to ask the questions in the follow-up to make sure we understand that.
Yeah.
She would never be on my outbound list because I'm probably not going to sell to her.
Sure.
So those are sort of the differences, and how you would approach them is very, very different. And to a pretty slick sales rep, they're like, intuitively, they already know that.
Yeah.
But there are distinctions, especially when you're scaling out a sales team with possibly a mix of lower level BDRs and more senior AEs and whatever that looks like. All of this factors into and goes back to the success rate on that paid spend.
Yeah.
So it's crucial on that alignment. We talk about alignment on every Wing It or Unhinged podcast, but that's just kind of some of the factors that will determine success, in some cases well outside of the digital marketer's responsibilities or sort of scope.
Right. And if you think of like, it's not just about the keywords that you want to get, buy on. I think those search terms, if you want to like segment it down and say our number one goal is really to drive awareness within a space, and we want to become known for, lots of people have done this, by the way, we want to become known for the top, Salesforce Marketing Cloud, support resource. And that's really our goal through a lot of this. Yes, downstream, they're going to find an ability to connect with us if needed, but our number one goal is to be that provider of information. So a junior marketer to a senior marketer, when they need to know something, when they're trying to do something, and they're going to go and do a search for how to do it, we want to be there. We want to come through. So that's a way different goal, right? And you're going to be looking at impressions. You're going to be looking at time on page, and you're not going to be getting too bent out of shape with like, how many leads do we get from that? Because you're going to be like, hey, no, we're hitting our numbers. people are spending time on our blog. They're getting through 2-3 articles every time they come to us. They're downloading the free templates that we need. And by the way, they're free. They're not even gated. So like that's what we want. We've got huge presence within that realm. Well, that's way different than saying, no. We only want to get engagement from people that need Salesforce marketing. Yeah.
Oh,
hey,
the time horizon
you're
is
in a
just-
pinch
yeah.
and you need us. That's what we want. Now, from a strategic perspective, you could say, well, they're actually very similar goals, right? Having a content strategy that supports that bit. Yeah, you're going to support a bunch of juniors. You're going to support a bunch of people that have no intention of ever working for an agency, but you may actually improve your ability to convert your paid media spend on a whole bunch more because you're now, like what you said earlier, well, now you're known as the top kind of thought leader or support provider in the space. Well, you're going to convert more people that actually need help, right?
There could be. You're right. They're so different. There's some similarities for sure. I do think there's a level of time horizon that really goes into that. Like in those two scenarios, they couldn't be more sort of polar opposite on immediate goals. Like the first one, it's more of like the brand awareness play, and you're like, we're in this for the long term, and we have a multi-year plan to become the de facto associated thought on these particular terms. And then on the other one, it's more sort of recency. Like we're trying to drive pipe this week, this month, this quarter.
Yeah.
Hopefully some of it may even close if your sales cycle is short enough. But they're very, very different. At the end of the day, probably gets to the same place.
Yeah.
But again, time horizons is a huge thing. And for anyone listening, I don't know how long your time horizon might be. Like you might have more immediate demands from, call it sales and marketing or just revenue. Fill the pipe as quickly as you can with the best quality leads. Okay, then going in with like a brand and awareness and content strategy probably isn't your best play.
No, but I also think it goes to what you said earlier about deal, like deal cycles, right? If your deals are 6 to 9 months at best case scenario, if let's say it was average 8-month deal cycle, that means or 9-month deal cycle, that means you're probably like 6 to 12 months, whatever the averages are, right? Mm-hmm. Is it realistic for you to be going for the sale on all your landing pages and all your keyword ads and arguably whatever organic content that you have sort of supporting that coming up? Probably not. And in fact, I would probably argue that in that case, a sophisticated buyer is probably more likely going to respond to the concept that like, this isn't a quick decision. We already know that because it takes us that long to do deals, right? And as a result, here's what our plan is. Like, come to this, training thing that we've done for free, and all you got to do is opt in and get the seven seminars on what you can learn about this stuff, or whatever the case may be. It's a different thought process that a lot of, like you said, hey, I'm under the gun to drive MQLs. So what am I doing? I'm pumping a bunch of like kind of garbage leads through the pipeline. It's like, you're not actually aligning this from a strategic perspective to your sales process.
Right. And it's funny you say that. I've seen a lot of what I would call like the stronger tech companies in various categories. They've sort of been doing this a lot more in, I would call it probably the last few quarters, where they're using like a LinkedIn, paid LinkedIn, to go and capture really top of funnel and more like awareness. Like, so I've mentioned them before, Chili Piper. They're actually paying as part of their paid media to capture individuals for their newsletter. Like it quite literally says, sign up for our Chili Piper newsletter. Mm-hmm. And so that's like about as high as you can get on the top of the funnel.
Yep.
And I guess they figure they'll work you down with, they've got really great content, they do. And they do a good job distributing it. And they're just like, you know what? We know what this looks like.
Yeah.
We're going to move an X% of people through as we go. We have, I would assume, ways to interpret and understand levels of engagement to know when they're ready to move forward.
Yep.
So like that's what we're seeing more and more. And that it makes a lot more sense to me than just being like, who wants the demo?
Right. Well, that was kind of what we were talking about before, right? Is that now you've got all this, like in their space, they've become a thought leader backed up with content. Now, when you do have people that are searching, they're probably more aware of that brand, and then they can come through. So it sort of amplifies the search. And then you could say, well, like you brought this up before we started, like the attribution of all that, does have to be kind of merged together to some degree, because it's like, well, obviously you talked earlier about PPC bumping organic. Now you're going to have brand bumping PPC, and like there's kind of a mix there. But I still think you have to be to be true to the channel, I think you have to look at it. I would imagine you'd have to look at that and say, we're still going to try to measure our PPC as best we can on its own. And maybe you take some website leads there, and this is what we do, because again, sometimes it's difficult to really check out what's different between those two and try to factor in a return on ad spend. You can't be sitting there losing 100,000 a year on PPC and then, feeling good about yourself because you've got a total return on investment that might
It's
make
true.
sense.
I just think in a B2B setting, which is the majority of our audience, I just think using paid and viewing it through only a lens of like direct response is probably not cutting it anymore. Like that's a bit of a weak position. I just think it's not cutting it anymore because it's not clear, and buyer journeys are becoming increasingly more complex across devices and channels, and even just how decisions are made. Like there are decision making committees for like $2,000 engagements.
Right.
So like imagine you're spending 6-figure SaaS deals and all that stuff multi-year. Yeah, like it's going to be complex. There's just no way around it.
Yeah.
So that's definitely got to be a consideration. Like the ROAS you're talking about, it makes sense. It cannot be viewed in that single lens only. So there's an art to this analysis.
Okay. All right. Well, I think that kind of gets us to a decent place around Unhinged. I mean, probably go on and on and on about this topic, but
That's fascinating. Yeah.
yeah. I mean, I think it's still something that you should have as part of your mix. I think it's really important to have, as we said before, a mix, right? Not just one thing. And
Definitely.
then the third thing would be make sure you've got, something that the business can digest from a testing perspective. What are we actually trying to achieve, and give it enough budget so hopefully you've got a partner or you've got a really capable internal that can sort of like map that out for you. Hey, at the end of 90 days, yeah, I'm asking for more budget than we typically would spend on this thing, but here's exactly why and what I'm looking for. You got competitors here, they seem to be doing it, there's blah blah blah. I'm looking for these things after that type of period, so we're going to amp our spend up 2-3x for a period of time. Let us figure out whether or not this can add value to our business or not, right?
Totally agree.
Okay. Alrighty.
That's a wrap.
That's a wrap.